So, what does it actually mean to be a man today in the 21st century? It's a huge question, one that's being debated pretty much everywhere you look. Today, we're going to dig into a very modern answer to that question, and then we'll see how it hooks into some incredibly ancient wisdom. It's a fascinating journey. Okay, so let's start with where we are right now. You can almost feel it in the air, this pressure that a lot of men are under. It's like the old roadmaps for how to be a man are just gone, or at least outdated. And there's this desperate search for a new path. I mean, with all the massive shifts in our culture, in the economy, it's no surprise that a lot of the old school ideas about being a man are being challenged. And this has led a lot of people to ask a pretty provocative question. Is traditional masculinity itself in some kind of crisis? Now, in response to all this uncertainty, a really powerful new ideal has popped up, especially online in corners of the internet people call the manosphere. It's an answer that's all about radical self-reliance. And it's got a name, the high-value man. So what is a high-value man? Well, the basic idea is a complete rejection of being a victim. It says a man's value comes from mastering himself and his situation. And this focuses on some really admirable traits, resilience, self-control for sure. But it also tends to lean really heavily on external things, like how much money you make or your status, as the main way to measure a man's worth. But here's where it gets really interesting. This whole modern quest for self-mastery, it's not new at all. In fact, it's like an echo of a powerful idea that's been around for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks were obsessed with the danger of extremes. It's captured perfectly in the myth of Icarus. We all remember his father warned him not to fly too high, right? But we often forget the other part of the warning. Don't fly too low either. The instruction was to find that middle path. Icarus's big mistake, his tragedy, was ignoring that advice. And this wasn't just a cool story. It became a central pillar of their philosophy. As you can see here, this idea of a golden mean just keeps showing up, from the famous temple at Delphi to Socrates to Plato. But it was Aristotle who really took this concept and turned it into a full-blown system. For Aristotle, this was everything. Virtue wasn't some destination you arrive at. Nope, it was a constant, difficult balancing act. It's not about being some perfect thing. It's about finding that perfect sweet spot, the mean, between two bad extremes. Okay, so that sounds good in theory, right? But what does it actually look like in practice? How does finding a mean actually help you build your character? This table breaks it down so perfectly. Let's just take that first one, fear and confidence. For Aristotle, the virtue of courage isn't having zero fear. That's just being reckless, which is a vice. And it's not being paralyzed by fear. That's cowardice, another vice. Real courage is the mean, right there in the middle. And you can see how this same logic works for all these other areas of life. And now let's bring it all back to today. That modern ideal we talked about, emotional resilience, staying calm under pressure. It's almost a perfect one-to-one match for what Aristotle called good temper, that middle ground between having no spirit and just being angry all the time. It really seems like we just put a new label on a very, very old idea. But wait, this search for balance wasn't just a Western thing, not by a long shot. Half a world away, and sometimes even earlier, Eastern philosophy was developing its own version of this, and it's remarkably similar. It's honestly kind of mind-blowing. In Buddhism, the Buddha taught the middle way, a path that avoids torturing yourself on one hand and just chasing pleasure on the other. In China, Confucius taught that going too far is just as bad as not going far enough. And of course, Taoism gave us that iconic symbol of balance, the yin and yang. So many different cultures, completely separate, all landed on the same fundamental truth. But the Buddhist version has a really fascinating and important little twist. See, the middle way isn't always about finding a compromise. Sometimes it's about realizing the whole choice is a trap and just avoiding the extremes altogether. And you do this through a skill the Buddhists called appropriate attention. It's basically the wisdom to know which questions are actually worth your time and energy, like, how can I be a better person? And which ones are just a total distraction, like, how do I stack up against that other guy? It's all about focusing your energy where it's actually going to make a difference. So, what does this all mean for us today? How do we take all this profound wisdom from both the East and the West and actually turn it into a practical guide for living? Well, here's a possible framework. You can start with a modern goal, like becoming high value, but use it as a launching pad for something deeper. Then you can apply these ancient ideas, the mean and the middle way, to find your own personal balance. Step 3 is to practice that appropriate attention, to really focus on who you are on the inside, not just how you look on the outside. And finally, you build your own personal code based on this timeless wisdom, so you have a solid internal compass instead of just chasing the latest trend. Now, of course, we have to be smart about this. This is not some magic formula. There's a well-known logical trap called the golden mean fallacy, which is this mistaken idea that the compromise between 2 points is always the right one. I mean, a compromise between the truth and a lie is still a lie, right? So you've got to use wisdom here.
The real power, as the psychologist Roger Walsh points out, isn't about choosing one philosophy over the other. It's about bringing them together. When you integrate these different but complementary ways of looking at the world, you can build a much more complete, a much more robust understanding of what it means to live a good life.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if we just reframed the whole quest? What if we stopped asking, how can I be seen as a high-value man? And instead, we started asking a much older and maybe a much more important question, how can I live a virtuous life? Perhaps just making that one little shift in focus is the most valuable thing you could possibly do.